Again, I'd like to just thank all of my family, friends, and work colleagues for your support, and thank you for coming out tonight. I would like to genuinely thank our Board of Education members for this opportunity, and I hope it meets your expectations or it's worth your time. I have a brief presentation to share, and I have 5 minutes to share this information, but if I don't get through the information, it will be available to all stakeholders after this presentation. Here's the 100-day plan or 100-day plan introduction. Again, my name is Ozella Ford, and this plan will take on the characteristics of advancing excellence in our school district. For the last 5 years, we have looked at excellence and the role that it has played in our work. And at this pivotal point in this transition journey, it's important that we understand the necessity for advancing excellence. And I'm going to skip some slides here. The 3 basic promises that you have from me if hired as the superintendent. Schools are safe spaces to work and learn. Schools are employee and student-centered. Schools are community-oriented, and the aspiration to instill the joy of hope. Reminds me at the end of this presentation, if I have time, to please share what the Bluebird stands for. School leadership is a maze. It takes you through a set of pathways leading to a final destination. The end result should always be likened to success for students, staff, and yourself. You must never quit. Keep going until you are amazed. My 3 top priorities in looking at where we are so far in our school district would be, of course, first and foremost, to move the school district forward. But the 3 top priorities that I have is to close the achievement and equity gaps widened by COVID-19, focus on the morale, mental health, and availability of supports for students and staff, improve student attendance and discipline. And if we do the middle one and do it well, we're going to improve and close. We're going to close achievement gaps and improve student discipline and attendance if we take care of our teachers and students. The entry plan have 3 phases. We'll go through those 3 phases at some point, if not tonight. Again, just note that they'll be shared at some point. But the entry phase will include starting July 15th and will go through December 14th. And phase 1 will, of course, take on an Advancing Excellence tour. The second phase will take on Advancing Excellence campaign, and the third phase will take on Advancing Excellence in the strategic plan relaunch. Transition goals have been established. These transition goals are aligned with our strategic plan goals so that we don't go too far off path to the accomplishments that have already been accomplished, but we do have some work to do that is acknowledged. In the concluding statement, my entry plan is designed to take the district to the next level. So that I'm able to formally introduce myself again, my name is Ozella Ford. I am a career educator, a lifelong learner, and a believer. Many of you already know who I am. So in a nutshell, this is who I am. I am a Selma City Schools scholar. Although I was born and raised in Montgomery, Alabama, many of the schools that I attended looked like our schools today. We had great educators, we had a caring staff, we had all of the connections that are needed to make a scholar successful. We had so many opportunities available to us, and it was those opportunities who shaped who I am today. So when I look into the faces of our scholars in our schools, I see me. I see me in their faces. And that's the reason why I work so hard to make sure that every child is afforded the best possible education. And I will end at this point, but please remind me at the end to share what the Bluebird stands for. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Ford. A bit of housekeeping, please refrain from recording the interviews and hold all applauses and cheers to the end, if so be it. Thank you. Dr. Ford, I have the first question, and we'll be jotting that down notes, so we're listening. Just most of us are jotting down notes. If you like me, you gotta jot it down so you remember it. But I'll begin with the first question. What are the methods you will use to keep yourself and the board current on important matters?
The methods that I would use to keep the board and myself current on updated matters would be, first of all, I'll create a OneNote Outlook notebook, which is found within our email system. Within that email system, we have the capability of creating a notebook, an electronic notebook, that we can use to share information, to also share updates weekly or bi-weekly. And with having the accessibility of that OneNote, going beyond email communications, we'll be able to have all of our communications in one location. So if you want to go back and retrieve those updates, you'll have them right there, opposed to having to just go through multiple emails. Also, I'll look at making certain that I have a monthly itinerary planned so that all board members will be abreast of what's going on in the district, as well as what's happening in the superintendent's office, to keep all of us on the same page again. For important messages that sometimes that can be lost in interpretation via text or email, I'll create videos to make sure that I'm communicating effectively and making sure that the points that need to be stressed are stressed throughout. And of course, an open line of communication. And that open line of communication will be simply picking up the phone and calling one another. And a lot of times we have gotten away from phone calls and we think text messages are enough, but they're not, because again, communication or definition or intent can be lost in the translation of a text message. So it'll be very important to me that we have various forms of communication, ways of communicating, and of course some of the using what we have in our fingertips to make sure all communications are safe as well as in one place.
The first question is curriculum instruction and development. How would you determine the strengths and weaknesses of instructional programs, and how would you go about making changes in those instructional programs? Walk us through a specific experience, the strategies, program, tools you employed, and the resulting data.
Thank you, Ms. Wooten. To determine the strengths and weaknesses of an instructional program, first we must look at student performance and student data to see if we're getting the outcome that we're seeking. We must also look to make sure that the programs that we're using are aligned with state standards. Sometimes, and I have found most often, that some programs are sold under the auspice of being aligned with state standards, but when you go back and do the correlation, they aren't. And that's another reason why we don't see and get the results that we're seeking. As well, I seek input from our leaders, from our teachers, as well as from parents to make sure they're seeing the outcomes that they're seeking as well. Because again, the student, at the end of the day, students learning, students progressing, and making certain that we're giving them what they need is most important with any instructional program. And another way of assessing the strengths and weaknesses of our programs, we do now currently, we perform walkthroughs or walkabouts in our schools. We're there to get first-hand information from our teachers and from our administrators to ensure that, again, what we say we're doing, we're actually doing in our schools, and to ensure that the programs that we have in our schools are legitimately providing the support that our scholars need. How are changes made in the program, in our instructional programs? Changes are made through program evaluation. We also look at our student data, because if the results that we're seeking aren't being yielded from the programs that we're using, we know it would be incumbent upon us to look at what is happening and make the change. And then also, again, going back to state standards, we're driven by the Alabama State Department of Curriculum and Instruction state standards, so that we don't have to make anything up. We know what success looks like by following the standards. We know what weaknesses look like we're not following the standards. So the standards that are provided by the State Department of Education provides us a measure of success. And if we're not getting that, the first thing we do is go back and look to see if what we're providing are aligned with state standards. Another thing that we do we're making changes or needing to make changes to our programs, we listen to the voices of our principals and teachers. We haven't implemented a curriculum in 7 city schools without teacher input. We've had curriculum reveals, we've had survey data, we've had publishers to come into the school district to share how those programs have worked in other districts, because sometimes, although it sounds good, some programs don't work in every district for everyone. As well as we've had our publishers to then provide us references so that we can get the information to make sure that the programs that we're adopting are able to meet our needs. So in doing that, we're making changes to our instructional program. We use a variety of resources, a variety of data sources, as well as listening to our teachers and principals about what is needed. When replacing programs, we also, like I said, go through a long process of vetting the programs. Every teacher in our school district has an opportunity to vote on any program that's adopted or implemented. We haven't implemented a program in Selma City that hasn't been vetted by our teachers, and our teachers given the ability to provide input as to what the program is. At the end of the day, whether that program is something that I say is the one that should be the one, it's the teacher voices that overrule that. If we look at, if we have a vote and 80% of the vote goes for one particular program, that's the program that we use, and we use it and we make the best out of it through professional development for all of our scholars.
Dr. Ford, what is the role of the superintendent in stimulating the faculty towards professional growth and self-improvement
well. Some strategies that we use in our programs is tiered instruction, because we want to meet the needs of all of our scholars. We have some who are at tier 3, but we also have scholars who are at tier 4. They are above level. So if you look at our summer enrichment program, if you look at our math program, as well as our reading program, they're all tiered. It was during my administration as the executive director of teaching and learning, as well as chief academic officer, that Seven City Schools implemented a tiered model where all of our teachers and administrators can speak to us meeting the needs of all of our students, and then we have personalized learning paths that are also being used. The results of all of these steps but they have guided us this year, for the first year, using iReady. Of course, we've gone through a pandemic, we've gone through multiple changes as far as regarding student attendance, and we've losing a number of students. But this year, looking at our data, our typical growth, which means students who are on grade level, went from 42% in reading last year to 95% receiving the 9-month growth that students should be receiving during school. That is a celebration within itself, 45% to 95% typical growth on the iReady. As well as in math, our typical growth was 45%. We went last year to 88% this year. We are making the academic gains that we're seeking, but the pandemic threw a curve in what it is we're doing. But post-pandemic, Seven City Schools is moving forward and will be on the right track. I'm sorry, Mrs. House.
On the curriculum, instructional development, what is the role of the superintendent in stimulating the faculty towards professional growth and self-improvement? Also outline the types of programs you feel will provide adequate professional growth and development for the staff.
First and foremost, the role of the superintendent is to lead by example. I wouldn't ask any teacher or administrator to do anything that I'm not willing to do, even if it means having to go through additional learning, having to attend additional workshops. I would lead by example. The role of the superintendent is to make sure that the needs of faculty and staff are met based on their voice. We want to hear their voice, and we want to also know what's going on with some of the latest adoptions across the state as well as nation. We'll also look at the national trends in education to stay abreast of what is happening in education, because sometimes we can be moving left and the nation or the state is moving right. It is so important that we are abreast of the latest trends in education, and that we know what is happening so that we're providing our scholars the same opportunities that other districts in other states are providing their scholars across the nation. Also, one of the roles of the superintendent is to collaborate with the administration to view continuous improvement plans. The continuous improvement plans technically drives the professional growth and development of teachers. Continuous improvement plans are updated yearly, and those plans are written at the school level. So as a support to schools, my goal would be to make sure that the continuous improvement plans are implemented and written at a level in which every teacher grows, every teacher benefits from the professional development and self-improvements that are outlined. The type of programs that I feel that we need right now, we need programs, and our teachers need to continue the professional growth and development that aligns with teaching the science of reading, because we need to have all of our scholars proficient by grade 3. Also teaching the science of mathematics. That's that numeracy act that just came out. Selma City was already on the cusp of implementing the steps that the numeracy act outlined by our math coaches this year. Because of looking at what our data is saying to us, the state came in this year and said we needed to hire math coaches. Well, Selma City did it last year because our ACAP data said something different and we should do something different. So making sure we're implementing the science of math. Also looking at project-based learning. We need to have real-world learning in our schools, as well as training onto how to incorporate experiential learning in our schools. All students learn differently, and it's incumbent upon us as educators to make sure we understand how our students learn, if we provide them the avenues to learn. And the last thing I would look at is the use of technology. What cutting-edge technology is out there that Selma City schools need to make sure our scholars are on the cutting edge of technology in this digital world in which we live in. For instance, like Amazon and Google. We need to have them in our school district. We need to have them a part of our career CTE, Career Technical Education Program. They're waiting for us to ask.
Okay, Dr. Ford. My question also comes under curriculum and instruction development. Given your research at Selma City School, what innovative strategies and approaches would you employ to increase student achievement, quality education, facilities, and effective use of funding? That's question number one. Question number two, what would the plan look like? And then question three, what would be the proposed outcome? And I'm asking all that together because I'm sure you're gonna give us the answer all together.
It makes sense to answer it all together because technically you can't have one without the other. Innovation is only good if it makes things better. A lot of times we look at innovation because it's cute. We want to do, A, B, C. Technically, there's no alignment with what it is its intended goal is. Innovation only works when it makes things better for our scholars, for our schools, for our staff, as well as administrators and our overall district. So for innovation is helpful to the future, our life goals, and should promote successful growth and development in our scholars. Authentic, innovative, and I said authentic, innovative strategies are those that promote critical and analytical thinking, professionalism skills, teachers collaborating, as well as our scholars collaborating, self-management and awareness, social and civic responsibilities, and innovative in learning, and an in-depth review of our core skills. I know a lot of times when we hear innovation, our first mind goes to technology. But guess what? Our students can't use the technology or the various programs if they haven't been taught to think critically. And we don't need a computer teaching our scholars how to think critically. That needs to be embedded in how we do school. And so that by the time our scholars leave here, even the professionalism skills, by the time they leave Selma City, we want every scholar in our district to be able to work on a job and perform at his or her ultimate peak because they have the professional skills to stay on that job. And of course, Selma City has several innovative projects in place. We've implemented STEM education. We've implemented coding. We have academies in each one of our schools. Now, all of that happened under my administration because of looking at the cutting edge of education, looking at the cutting edge of technology, and knowing that if we stay behind and if we don't keep up with the times, we will be behind. but the goal is to keep moving forward with innovation and making sure that we're taking care of and making certain that we're eliminating the digital divide that happens sometimes in rural school districts versus those in urban school districts. The effective use of funding is tied to the district's strategic plan as well as schools' continuous improvement plans. We have a strategic plan. If we look at that strategic plan, it outlines the various aspects of how we should be doing business in Selma City. It also outlines what schools should be doing as far as the funding aspects. And with funding, if we don't have something that we're tying it back to, we'll be all over the place. We have great ideas. I can sit and think about great ideas every night. And coming here the next morning energized and ready to move forward. But that's not how school works. We have to have a plan. We have to have had the foresight to look at that plan and to look at where our district needs to be based on not just one resource, but various data sources. And then we move forward from there. So we tie our funding back to the strategic and continuous plans that should be in place in our schools. The effective use of how would my plan benefit all programs to my plan for moving forward is to look at equity and access. Does every scholar have access to what it is we're doing? I know we're one-to-one district. However, does every scholar has access to that robotics program? Or do we still select through each time we have a competition? Does every scholar has access to the various coding programs that we're using? Or do we see a select through? We need to go beyond looking at the select through and take care of every scholar. That's equity. That's, in my opinion, when we really make the difference between those our scholars who live in the zip code close to Mentor Avenue, or those who live in the zip code close to Maxey Avenue, or those who live in that zip code close to Glendale. That's when we're really doing the jobs that we're getting paid for. And the various caliber of programs are driven by facility usage. In our facilities, sometimes we're limited to implementing various scholars because of the infrastructure. We can't go and buy $1 million programs and then come and try to use them in our buildings and the infrastructure doesn't hold up. So again, as a collective board, we're going to have to make sure we go back and look at the infrastructure in our buildings. We're trying to use programs that were created in the 21st century, whereas some of our buildings were created in the 19th century. So in order to move Selma City forward, facilities, as well as funding, as well as our outlook regarding its next steps need to be all in line. Again, like I said, I'm looking at bringing Amazon, Google. I mean, I want the words for our scholars because I can't think of one who don't deserve it. That we must have the facilities to accommodate these services. They're waiting on us. That aviation center that's just opening, they're waiting on us. I mean, I took my elementary kids flying. I mean, that's no big deal. I wanted them to fly. It was my first time flying, and I was more afraid than they were. But guess what? I wanted them to experience have the exposure to flying. So I took them flying in helicopters. So I want that same thing for every scholar, not some, but every scholar in our school district.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ford. The next question kind of piggybacks on that question. Given your research of Selma City Schools, what are the top 3 priorities to produce measurable outcomes in student achievement, quality of education, facilities, and effective use of funding? Talk about your past experiences and successes. What are the top 3 priorities?
the top 3 priorities that I see from the vantage point of being in the thicket of it, the 3 priorities that I see, and this is based on data, this is based on observation, this is even based on some of the audits that we've received. It's focused on the morale, mental health, and availability of supports for students and teachers. We must take care of our employees if we want them to take care of the business that is at hand, which is where I'm leading to next, closing achievement gaps. We need to close achievement and equity gaps that have been widened by COVID. If we do that again by taking care of our teachers, they're going to take care of our babies. A happy teacher, a happy classroom creates a happy scholar. And the last priority, improve student attendance and discipline. I looked at the panorama data that we have that we've used for the last 2 years in our school district. That panorama data tells us what our teachers are wanting. And the very first thing the second thing that was ranked the lowest this school year is discipline. Our students have been able to contend with discipline issues in the classroom. We're going to have to address that, and I have a plan for addressing that as well. Also, looking at the first issue was going back to teacher morale, our teachers having a voice. They want a voice in their schools. And how do we provide them that voice? We have leadership teams that are formed in our schools. We have budget committees that are formed in our schools. We should even have a spirit team formed in our schools to make sure there's something everyone can contribute in our schools. If we do that, we're going to increase morale, which is our first goal. We're going to also look at mental health. We're going to make available the supports that are needed by students and scholars, because believe it or not, some scholars don't come to school just to misbehave. I don't believe that. I believe there's something else behind that. And if we can ever get to what the behavior, not just treat the issue, but treat the behavior and what it is behind it, we're going to improve schools. As far as the effective use of funding to help with this, again, tying our funding back to the strategic plan. You're going to hear me say that throughout tonight, because we need one Bible source that we're using to make certain that you're able to hold me accountable where our funding is used in our schools, as well as able to hold our schools, as well as even yourselves accountable how funding is used. If we have a strategic plan, and I know you all have invested time and energy and resources in the development of that strategic plan, and I'll be honest, the first version of that plan was really written for improvement. So if we go back to that strategic plan, we're going to be able to really align the activities that we're doing in our district and get the results that we're seeking. Funding should always be driven by continuous improvement. That's at the school level, at the district level, when in support of the strategic plan and past experience. I have transformed schools in every district in which I've worked. If you look at the dossier that I provided you, you're going to see the difference in the discipline. You're going to hear candidates for the next 2 or finalists for the next 2 nights talk about transformation, but do they have the evidence? I have the evidence as to the transformation that I have made in schools. Transformation is not about people, it's about actions. Have we made the action? Do we have the actions to support transformation? I have cultivated and developed teachers. I've cultivated and developed teacher and learning teams that who share the same vision and mission, which is to make schools better. in which that's been my life work. I have the evidence for doing that. If we take care of the well-being of our faculty and staff, if we take care of the well-being of our students, this community, our parents, our families, we're gonna get the outcomes that we're seeking. But first we need to look at the priorities and address these priorities. Thank you, Ms. White.
Dr. Ford.
Yes, ma'am.
We have several programs that basically overlap each other simply because of the priority to spend funds instead of using them to directly impact student learning. What ideas do you have on implementing ways to focus Selma City Schools' priorities directly on our students?
Thank you. Whether or not I am the top candidate at the end of this process, our school district definitely needs to look deeper into the matter as to how programs are overlapping. Of course, all of our departments have programs that have been implemented. And so we do need to look deeper into how and where those programs overlap. That's first and foremost. Let's look to see what is happening to ensure Selma City Schools' priorities are student-centered. We must ensure that our strategic plan and school-based continuous improvement plans are also followed. If we follow what we put in place, again, that's a source of accountability for me as the superintendent, if I'm the candidate of choice. That's also accountability for our principals, all the way down to our students. We have mechanisms in place, but are we following those mechanisms? I can speak for teaching and learning as far as programs. And looking at 10 years of historical data for Selma City Schools, we didn't first implement a program or change anything without looking at the data. I followed that data down from school to school, as well as did a vertical alignment of our schooling to see just what the problem is, as well as looked at from grades K through 12 to see where we started losing students. And looking at that information, I can tell you where where we started losing students, and I can tell you exactly what programs with teaching and learning, in which we have three, our core program, in which was streamlined tremendously since I came on board, because before I got here, we had multiple programs that multiple schools were using. There's no cohesiveness. But before I got here, we have a core program for math, a core program for reading. We have our assessment/2 program, which is iReady, and then we have Forger for Tier 3. Those are the only three programs that teaching and learning uses. And what Forger does, iReady can't do, because Forger is going to get down to the level where students are, whether it's foundational, which is finance, or phonemic awareness. iReady doesn't dip down that far. And so, that's just on behalf of teaching and learning, I can speak to the alignment, but it takes looking at data. And we do need to take a serious look at where we are in the district to ensure that we're being fiscally responsible and spending any dollar that comes into our district, any and every dollar that comes into our district.
Thank you, Dr. Ford.
Yes.
My next question is, in the past 5 years, Selma City Schools has lost a lot of teachers and personnel for various reasons. How can we implement programs that value employees while maintaining our focus on student achievement?
Again, guys, I go to the data. I can talk off the cuff of my head and tell you why this is happening or why this is happening. We're not here to even place blame on anyone. We know some people move out of necessity and out of family plans. However, when looking at our panorama data, going back to the data, I always go back to the data to address an issue. Going back to our panorama data, our teachers' greatest concerns have, as I said before, been centered around student behavior. That's their greatest concern. The second greatest concern has been centered around not having a voice in the planning and in their schools. With the great resignation that occurred starting last year, and I'm here to tell you, it is predicted that the great resignation will continue for the next 5 years throughout 2030 if we don't correct the matter. So for the various reasons why people leave, I've looked at, okay, what are some of the various reasons in which they stay as well? And I'll address that as well. But making certain that our employees are balanced and then have the accountability, because sometimes we can go too far with the culture and climate aspect of, and I'm thinking about one particular school right now, we could go too far with the culture and climate and it takes away learning, and I've seen that happen. But there needs to be balance, and some things that we could and should do is make sure our employees, that we're employee oriented. We don't need to be central office oriented. We don't even need to be principal oriented. We need to be employee oriented. We're all employees. And we should be on that same, people should see all of us at the same, where we are on the same level. We should be, all staff members should have an opportunity to serve on committees that gives them a voice to their talents. When I was a principal, I hired teachers based on their talents. Because if I knew if they wanted to be at the school, and if I opened a door for them to utilize their talent, opposed to them thinking I just wanted them to come in and teach, and do all the other lesson planning and all the other items, I knew it would be a struggle to really get to bring that teacher out. So I hired teachers based on their talent, and we had some of the most amazing programs offered at my school because teachers were valued for their talents. We need to monitor the day-to-day interactions we have with each other to ensure that we are understanding. I'll be the first to admit and leave it hanging. When we do that, we're already in the hole because they're already planning their next move. Well, when we hire teachers, we must have coherent onboarding processes that will take them through year 1 all the way through year 3. And again, that's done intentionally. Plan time for collaboration. When I got to Selma City, and a lot of our principals will attest, I revamped the schedule at Sophia Kingston to ensure that they had collaborative planning at least 2 days a week, which was uninterrupted. And they were so happy and so grateful for that time to plan together that it didn't have to take place after school. It needed to take place during school, and when they wanted me in the meetings, I didn't go into the meetings unless they asked me to come into the meetings. And when they asked me to come in, it was to clarify one. And then the most important thing, well, 2 more, professional development, and then the most important thing is letting our teachers be leaders. We should be creating a leadership pipeline for Selma City schools, starting with our newest to our most veteran teachers. Anyone, you shouldn't have to pull individuals from the outside of this district any longer to hire as your superintendent, because we would have created a pipeline in our school district that you could go into any school and say, you'll make a great superintendent, you'll make a great superintendent, you'll make a great superintendent, because of giving our teachers the ability to also be leaders. Thank you.
you feel about no pass, no participate?
That's a tricky question. I have a nephew, and he lives, his whole world is sports. And so, but just, I want to answer that part of it first. How do I feel about no pass, no play? It's incumbent upon the school district to monitor our scholars. And if we see that they're slipping in a particular area, no child should just fail, by just fail, and no one has touched that child. You know, the baby between the kiddo, between the beginning of the grading period and the last. That's on us if that happens. We have supports in our school district, and many times you see coaches serving as tutors to make sure all of our scholars are prepared and equipped for the challenge, and we're not penalizing them and not having them to be able to participate in athletics because we haven't provided them, our scholars, the support beforehand. But going back to the extracurricular activities provide our scholars with real-world exposures, real-world applications that's beyond the school day, beyond the classroom, that both support their applied knowledge, it supports the application of knowledge as well as analytical knowledge. So extracurricular activities are definitely needed. Going back to an experience, I was serving as a principal. I saw that my scholars could not get into the magnet schools because what we were doing in our school, basically we had to catch up, and so we couldn't give them that advanced acceleration like we wanted to. So what I did do, I identified a magnet program in the school district that said, if your scholars have these particular performing arts have these particular arts activities behind their name, they can come into our program. So guess what we did? We created an Arts in the Afternoon program. I had creative writing, I had creative dance, I had cheerleading, I had basketball, and this was all sponsored by teachers who wanted to be a part of the process, and me helping them to, share your talents with our scholars. But extracurricular activity, it's one of the best things that we could do if we really wanted to create well-exposed, when I say well-exposed students who have had opportunities for exposure, well-experienced scholars, and then those who are able to really look at real-world problems and solve them analytically as well as and I believe that our talent, if we give our scholars room, their talents and their gifts will make room for them, not only in Selma City, but beyond Selma City, anywhere they go in life. But it's up to us to foster it while we have to.
Dr. Ford, describe your ability to cultivate a disciplined, safe, and orderly school environment for students.
And I will put myself on the table. It's one of these times I'm going to be vulnerable. Okay, I'm being very vulnerable. I believe in students. I believe in an orderly environment. I believe in every child having the right to learn, and I don't believe no one or no scholar should come in and take the learning off of the learning, the activity, the focus off of learning. So to cultivate a culture of discipline, safe and orderly school environments for our students, it starts with the communication of expectations. It starts with the communication of establishing norms for our classrooms. All scholars should be a part of establishing those norms. We have a team in Selma City right now, our academic support team right now, who are walking our summer teachers through developing contracts, social contracts. Those social contracts serve as an agreement between the students and the teachers as to how how our classrooms will be operated. So I believe in our students having a voice in developing the norms for their classroom, as well as there needs to be quality. If we say that we're doing A, B, C, D, as a school district, we need to do A, B, C, D. Otherwise, we're setting our scholars up for failure. Because again, if something happens on the outside of our school, if they expect, well, it's going to be just pushed away, it's going to be forgotten. Sometimes that doesn't happen, if that makes any sense. But if we prepare them and let them know that there are rules and consequences for their behavior, and that all of us have rules and consequences for our behavior, then we'll set our scholars on a path that will cultivate a culture of discipline. Also, it takes teachers and administrators working together to cultivate an orderly learning environment. Sometimes I see the principals, I can go into schools, I see the principals going 9 to 9, running from one fight or incident to the other. And he's passing by teachers in the process who are standing there. You have to create a shared vision for your staff as well to let them know, this is what we're doing. It's not all about me, but this is about all of us doing our part. And then lastly, we need to follow the code of conduct. We have it in place so that we're able to treat everyone equally. Without that code of conduct being in place, that means that I can hand down a 5-day punishment or disciplinary action to one person, and you can hand down a 10-day. It doesn't work like that. Regardless of the circumstance, every child needs to be treated fairly. And so we need to follow our code of conduct. I promise you it's been well written to include remediations and to include also interventions before it gets to the point of it being an office referral. I believe in second chances. I believe in everyone having a second and sometimes a third chance. But because suspension, we've already learned, don't work. And then the last thing we need to, and equally, we need to have trauma-informed practices in our schools where we're really looking at mental health supports. COVID has done something to all of us. We have scholars in our schools who have lost parents. We have scholars in our schools who have lost their only caretakers. Tell me, showing up at school going to be, showing up at school and learning is going to be on your mind. No. I mean, me being at the age I am now, losing my father, I tell you, if I didn't have another support system and colleagues reaching out to me, it would have been a long road ahead. So mental health is so important. And we can't be disciplined without mental health.
Thank you so much. Next question, what steps would you take to increase student enrollment and decrease student loss? Give examples of times you have been successful in a similar effort and what were the outcomes?
Yes. But my question is, what is Selma City Schools' brand? Most athletic, most corporations, they sell people on their brand. What is Selma City Schools' brand? We need to create a brand that sells our schools to our students and their families to let them know that they're valued and that we want them here in Selma City. So what is our brand? That's the first thing. Once we create a brand, we will have scholars, even if their families chose to leave Selma, fighting to stay here. And we know in this age, most of our parents listen to who? Their children. Am I right? They're going to listen and get the input of their children. So we need to create a Selma City Schools brand. Also, as a school principal, the first thing I did to improve the achievement, to improve enrollment in our schools was to improve student achievement. No one wants to be a part of a failing organization. If we improve our student achievement, we're gonna keep students here because people will see value in what it is that we're doing. And that's what we have been working to improve. When parents come to my office about withdrawing students or they're moving to another district, you know what I do? The first thing I do is go into compare mode. I want to compare how that school district is doing compared to what we're doing. I want to show the similarities, and I also want to point out their weaknesses and point out our strengths. So making certain that we build a school district that's high performing, and we can sell students in excellence route to our parents to stay. We need equitable and accessible opportunities for our scholars. We need to leading up to the pandemic, 7 city schools, if you look at the information shared, we had improved our chronic absentee is great leading up to the pandemic. This year, we took a hit. We took a big hit regarding enrollment. Last year, we took a hit regarding enrollment because of the pandemic. But what we're planning to do as a result of that, we need a student enrollment liaison. That person to work with families, that person to work with our students, and again, not to, okay, if you don't do this, and this, you're gonna end up in truancy, but we want to understand what's going on as to why you're not coming to school. And if it takes me riding with that liaison, going out to homes, doing home visits, I'll be riding with the liaison, going to homes to do home visits to make certain that our scholars are in school. But the goal is to increase student enrollment. And last year, and for the last 2 years, students with perfect attendance, we awarded them the superintendent's perfect attendance award for the district. I had one student year before last who did not receive that award. We took out pizza. We made a big deal out of it. I had one student to be overlooked. Don't you know that the aunt hounded me for the summer to make sure she received that award? It means to her. So incentivizing enrollment, and of course making sure our data is accurate, because with Power School, the enrollment, the new implementation of Power School, I think there's some glitches that we still need to fix with enrollment.
Dr. Ford, my question comes under business and finance. What do you see as the superintendent's role in budgeting and fiscal management, the board's role, the principal's role, as well as the faculty's role? And Dr. Ford, when you speak, if you'll put the mic up to your mouth because it's going in and out.
Oh, I was saying I'm gonna drink some water, okay? The superintendent's role in budgeting is to be actively involved in the fiscal planning for the long range fiscal health of our school district. The budget is like, in my opinion, the gas that makes the district runs. Without gas in your car, as high as the gas rates have risen over the last couple of weeks, months, without gas in your car, can it move forward? No. The budget is like the gas that we put in our automobiles. We use it to make it run. And being that we need gas in our cars, our school district is also responsible for providing all children with a quality and equitable education, which is done through, again, going back to the strategic plan, going back to the plan that holds all of us accountable for the work that has to be done. The board, each year we receive a audit from the Alabama Public Examiners. That audit shows us where we're falling short. It's incumbent upon us to make certain that we go back and address the audit findings with a plan to, again, find out, why the findings and how we're gonna address those. We have a CSFO in our school district. The superintendent and the CFO must be partners in the budget planning process. And as partners, that means that the CFO also has responsibility of making certain that, she is holding us accountable for doing the work that we say that we're gonna do. If a contract comes in and it's not a part of that strategic plan layout, the CFO, okay, hold up, Ozella. Remember at the beginning of the year, we said that we're gonna do A, B, C, and D. Our CFO, and I know her very well, she will do that if the relationship is there. So I'm gonna work with our CFO to make sure before we bring any contract or any item that will require spending to the Board of Education, that she and I have worked out, what it is for, what the fund is for, how will it be used, what's the and if we do that, we'll have a fiscally responsible school district because we're covering all the bases. And again, just going back to the public examiners. A public examiner should not come to our district and find us when we have plans in place and processes in place that should really support or prevent any findings. And lastly, we should be good stewards over the funding that comes into our school district. And what I mean by being good stewards over that funding, at the end of the day, if it doesn't trickle down to improving student learning outcomes, if it trickles down to supporting teachers to improve student learning outcomes, then we need to also give it a second thought. We need to also have some explanation or some reasoning behind why it is that we're planning to spend these funds in this manner. A contract would never come to the board without that layout where how it benefits the students, how it benefits our teachers, how it benefits the schools, and then lastly, where the funding is coming from. And again, to make sure that there's no overlap, we'll make sure it's targeted in for this particular line item.
So much. Next question. How important do you feel it is for the superintendent to be actively engaged in the community and schools? How would you ensure that students, parents, and faculty needs are heard, addressed, and aligned to district priorities? Give an example that evidence your experience in this area.
Okay. The superintendent serves as the face of our school district. And the superintendent being the face of the school district, not being actively engaged in the community, actively engaged in events that are happening in the community. If I was a community sponsor or if I was a community representative, the first conclusion I would draw is to say that, well, our school district isn't represented. They may not be concerned about what it is that we're doing. So as the superintendent serving as the face of Selma City Schools, active engagement is a necessity. Am I saying that I can clone myself and be everywhere? But there's a department at central office. We have great leaders in our school district who, if we partner together, you're gonna still receive that advocacy from the superintendent being actively engaged in our schools. Last Sunday, I was here for church service at an invite from one of our employees. It's nothing to, if I'm committed to Selma, I'm gonna be committed to this community because I know the community, our schools are a microcosm of the community, so we have to be a part and walk in sync in this together. Also, to ensure that, the next question, how will you ensure that students, parents, and the faculty needs are heard? Again, going around and having authentic conversations with our faculty and students and staffs. Authentic, and what I mean by authentic, I want to show that I'm concerned about what it is that they're going through, what it is that they're experiencing. And 9 times out of 10, there's more than one way to do anything. And that's all some people want is another option. We're going to get the same results at the end, but that authentic communication, that authentic partnership between our teachers and our scholars and listening to their voices. If A doesn't work, let's try B. I'm in agreement with that. And also just looking at my current role right now allow me to engage authentically with our parents, with the community right now. And I promise you, I think every parent in Selma City has my phone number. I get calls all time of night and all time of day, on the weekend, about issues that they're having in schools. And at the end of the day, my ultimate goal is to try and fix it. I want to fix it because, again, people are calling you because they need help. I have a colleague who laughed at me often and joked on me about, we had an issue and it was regarding attendance, and we're working out, trying to come up with a way to get 60. Well, the child had a couple of zeros, okay? And she had missed the mark. But I got my calculator out and I started punching buttons. And she just leaned back in the chair and looked at me. She said, after the parent left, she said, regardless how you punch those buttons, I wanted to see if you were going to come up with a 60 out of all these zeros. I said, that's all I wanted to do was give her hope. I wanted for her to see that I was trying, and after I couldn't come up with that 60 out of all of those zeros, my next step was, okay, this is what we can do. I'll never leave a situation with this all we can do. There's always something else that we can do, and that's what parents want to know and hear. What can you do? And that's what I'm willing to offer our scholars. And so the example in this area is making sure that, again, what's the alternative? There is an alternative to any and every problem that our scholars may experience, but being actively engaged in the community. I've been coming to Selma since I was probably 12 or 13 years old, participating in the Jubilee Easter each year. At the 50th Jubilee, I was here, and I remember standing in the middle of Broad Street saying, I would love to work here. And I didn't say it out loud, but it just resonated in my spirit. I would love to work here. And since then, if you pass by the central office or if there's something on the weekend, you're going to see that little gray car sitting there because I'm already invested in improving the school district. So actively engaging our parents, going to the homes, I believe that's the best way to improve our school district. I found one of our scholars living in Montgomery, and so I went and picked him up. His mom was having an issue at the time. So guess what? You're going to school. If I have to drive there myself, so he rode to school with from January through May, because my ultimate goal was to ensure that that baby was successful.
Dr. Ford, based on what you know about this community and the school district, what challenges do you believe our district faces right now?
The challenges that we face right now, we're looking at, first and foremost, crime. We need to work with the city, our local officials, to combat the crime. Some of the incidents that are happening in our schools involve crimes that some of our scholars or school-age scholars are committing. And over the Christmas holidays, I spent most of my holidays here in town working on an issue that had occurred right before we got out for the holidays because of wanting to understand, and wanted to see what was done best for these scholars. So crime is number one. School safety is number two. Every child deserves to come to school and feel safe. Every child deserves to come to school and feel safe. Also looking at the community is shrinking. Selma is one of the fastest shrinking communities in the state, and I think was compared to the nation. And knowing that, we're going to have families who move, but there are also grant opportunities that are out there through the American Rescue Plan that will still fill the void that if we do have parents who move out, that will fill the void with funding. So we need to ensure that we're making certain that we're keeping abreast on where we are as far as the residents leaving our city. Also the lack of economic opportunities in healthcare. Again, we need to provide our scholars and our families some of the best health care. And the last thing is mental health. The mental health and wellness and the mental fortitude of our teachers will drive the improvement of our school district and our next steps.
Dr. Ford, going to vision and philosophy. How can Selma City schools become more cohesive and systemic with regards to educational practices?
Our community is a transient community. We have students who will start 1 month at this school, about 2 months later, they're at the next school, and about 3 months later, they're at the next school, and they'll end the school year at another school. There's 4 schools. A cohesive and systemic educational school district as well as educational practices is one of the best things that we could do as a district, so that when we say our mission is to ensure that all scholars are globally ready and competent to compete, we're living up to that. How do we do that? We look at our data, we monitor our data to see what the trends are. And based on our data, we know what next steps that need to be created. However, those next steps, because like I said, there are pillars to implementations. Those next steps may look differently from school to school, but having genuine goals that we have set from our school district for the school district with the voices of all stakeholders involved, it would give us, it would help us to prepare a systemic education environment. Also, looking at the curriculums that we're using, making sure that those curriculums are meeting the current needs of today, as well as looking at some of the other support programs that are out there, making sure that they're meeting the needs that we have today. And in particular, just really making certain that when we say all students read, when we say all students learn, that's genuinely our thrust for making certain that all students learn and have the same equitable opportunities to succeed. So a cohesive learning environment means having all your staff members. It means having all of your leadership team members. It means having your central office team members speaking that same language, that one team, one voice, committed to excellence. And what is excellence? We may have to define excellence. Because so far, I don't know if we've done a great job of defining excellence, but we may have to define excellence. But cohesion is making sure that everyone knows where we are now and where we're going. And that's done through clear communication, precise communication, and making sure, again, we have a plan. There has to be a plan for moving forward.
Dr. Ford, this is my last question for you.
Okay.
Eliminating the achievement gap is a must. What approaches would you pursue? What leadership and guidance would you provide to ensure these approaches are properly evaluated and adjusted over time to meet changing students' needs?
The achievement gaps that we have in our school district, and again, like I stated, I have looked at our data over a 10-year historical span of time. I've looked to see where, in my opinion, schools should be performing higher than where they are, and where some schools are underperforming, and to ensure that we're eliminating achievement gaps in our school district. We need a plan for addressing the actual gaps first. Do we know what these gaps are? Do we truly know what the gaps are? I can tell you what they are, but when you speak to our school leaders, when you speak to our district leaders, do they understand what the gaps are? I can tell you right now that we have a gap in third grade by third grade. I can tell you right now, we have a gap by sixth grade. I can tell you right now, we have a gap by the end of eighth grade. But me knowing these gaps and working towards an end to achieve these gaps really doesn't mean a hill of beans if I don't have the entire team working with me to get that to achieve the end goal that we're looking for. And that's what's going to eliminate achievement gaps. We need the right programs. We need to go back and again, like I said, evaluate our programs to see if we're getting the outcomes. The data that I shared with you earlier from IRED to see that we went from 44% to 95 or so percent earning their typical growth, that's almost every child learning this school year. We need to look at what programs that we have in place to ensure that we're offering an equitable education to all. And what I mean about equitable, every child, all learners moving in or reaching that growth. Leadership plays a part in making certain that this happens, because if at the central office, if we're saying we're going left, if leadership if it gets back to the school, that they're going right, you don't see the results that are happening. Leadership plays a part in the guidance in that, like we have created professional learning communities with our leaders. We're growing our leaders to understand how to read their data, how to look at and work with teachers, and how to individualize their support to teachers based on the teacher's data, not school-wide, not based on the student body, but we're working with students now, teachers, principals now, as to how to work with their teachers in professional learning communities. And even next year, we're gonna ramp it up some to include 2 professional learning communities by the end of the school year. But we're working with our leaders to be leaders. Also, to ensure that the approaches that we're using are evaluated. The true evaluation for our approaches, are we getting the outcomes that we're seeking? If we're not getting those outcomes that we're seeking, guys, I tell our teacher learning team, I tell our coaches, I'm not stuck to any one program. I'm not committed to any one program. What moves me is to see that my babies learn, to see that our kiddos are getting the education that they deserve. And if there's a program that's not doing that, based on teacher voices, based on the results that we're seeking, we can move away tomorrow. So sometimes we stay in a situation and we stay there too long and we hurt students in the process. So to make sure that we're eliminating the achievement gaps, we're going to have to provide academic supports. We need to provide tiered supports. We need to provide acceleration, add acceleration to our program. We need to ensure that the mental health and wellness of our scholars are taken care of. And most importantly, we need to train our parents. We need to train our parents to help and assist at home. I tell people all the time, my grandfather used to say us instead of we. And a lot of times as teachers, we fuss about, well, they come to school and don't know how to do their homework. I had the best grandfather in the world, in my opinion. Everybody else in here says the same thing. But would you have wanted him teaching me English if his terminology for we was us? No, it's incumbent upon the school district to provide those measures when it comes to closing the achievement gap. Identify the gap, recognize the gap, and be committed to changing the gap. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Dr. Ford. In closing, a few closing questions. What do you think has been your most outstanding contribution to your present or most recent school system?
My most outstanding contribution to our present school system. Some people would have to come to Selma and learn Selma. Some people would have to come to Selma and get to know it before they can love it. I already love Selma. I'm already invested in Selma City Schools. And what I mean when I say love it, I love our school district because I can see the possibilities. As I started out earlier, when I shared, I am a Selma student. I grew up in Montgomery, Alabama, but the schools that I attended looked like our schools. I had caring individuals in those schools who pressured me, who pushed me to be who I am today. So, can you find anyone else who is ready tomorrow to start moving this district forward? I don't think so. I'm ready, but I'm ready to advance Selma City Schools forward, and we will advance in excellence.
Do you have any questions that you would like to ask us? We have time for one.
Okay. Let me ask, as the school board in the first year, what do you want for Selma City? What do you wish to see change or improve upon in our school district?
Dr. Ford, I would like, you kind of spoke to it, that teacher involvement. So I don't call references, I call people as references, but I spoke to an educator who shared with me her interview when she interviewed back in Selma City and how she went from school to school to various schools, and the principals had an opportunity to lay eyes on her, talk to her, interview her, and talk to her. It wasn't this panel of people who have no involvement, just an opinion. So I kind of like that, and I would really like to see something like that happen in Selma City, where people who are going to be involved would have some type of involvement in the interviewing process, but if not the hiring process, just a little more hands-on with those people and the teachers' input, because that's what we get often about teachers complaining about, like, you know, the programs and whatnot. So I would like to see a little more teacher involvement and like really teacher input about in building.
For me, I think, I have 4 areas that I would like to see the school system move into, and my areas of focus are, of course, academic achievement. Like, I want to see the district have a laser focus on academic achievement. I think that the budget should be completely aligned with things that are going to be more productive in our classrooms, period. Like, that's it for me. And I think that we need to have a laser focus on reading and on math. The second thing I think is that we need to ensure that our schools and our facilities are safe and that they are conducive for learning. I think they should not feel like prisons. I don't think our children should be treated like prisoners. I think that we need to cultivate the environments that we want to see. If we want productive citizens, don't live in environments where they can't talk, they can't walk in a straight, like they don't live like that.
That's not innovation.
Ma'am.
I said, that's not innovation.
Right. And so that's what I would like to see, safe schools, a laser focus on academics, and from the central office, particularly the superintendent, I would like to see someone, the leader, as well as their entire team, from the top down and the bottom up. I think everybody should be connected to the students and connected to what's actually happening in the classrooms.
Okay. Well, this concludes this interview. Dr. Ford, we appreciate your time and your insight and your direction that you'd like to take the system forward. We have 3 other candidates we're interviewing, and we want to congratulate you on being one of the finalists. And we wish you all the luck in this process, and thank you for your time tonight. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. And back to Ms. Hauser regarding our teachers being involved. The first thing on for the 100-day plan is to create impact teams. That's every teacher having a role to make an impact based on what their team assignment is. That's every team. And Mrs. Wooten, I was listening at you as far as what you're looking for. Again, no problem at all, because we have we're in sync with student achievement should be our #1 priority. Can anyone think of any student, any child who doesn't deserve the best education possible? I mean, from the ones who have gotten on your nerves, can you think of any scholar who doesn't deserve that? I've asked that in meeting after meeting and haven't gotten a response.